So we'll get ready to settle in for our sitting time, whatever you can do, appreciating what's moving in our hearts. For us in the Twin Cities, of course, it's for many of us at least, a very tender time. There was a lot of beautiful community energy on Monday, a lot of community action in support of our immigrant neighbors and, yeah, in support of justice and fairness and kindness. And then another tragic killing, as most of you have heard, on Saturday morning when Alex Preddy was shot and killed. Such a obvious, senseless death that touches us deeply. But there's just so many of these things that tenderize our hearts, not just in the Twin Cities, of course. Families being separated, so hard to comprehend that profound disruption in so many families that are happening now, where one of the members, a parent, is taken away. So much uncertainty. And it's not about triggering overwhelm for ourselves, but directly seeing if there's a wisdom and love that can show up for the conditions of our world. And of course, it's not just here in the Twin Cities. So many places where there are reverberations of suffering and insecurity and fear. And thankfully, also so many places of real beauty and goodness happening. And do we have a heart now in this moment that doesn't need to rely on denial, doesn't need to collapse or shrink from what's moving? So, real question, is there now the capacity to feel what we're feeling, including any qualities of numbness? So, whatever it is, we're not second guessing it or imagining that what we're feeling should be different than what we're feeling. And this is not just a gift, a healing gift for ourselves, but I think it's really appropriate to sense this as a healing gift all around. Nobody left out. This experimentation, this willingness to be close, to feel what we're feeling. So it's not about figuring out, again, not trying to figure out what I should be feeling. It's much simpler. I care enough about my life right now. I care enough about the world right now, all that's moving. I care enough to be right in the middle, to be right in the middle and valuing being open, being undefended, feeling what I feel, feeling what's moving. Just exploring in ways that feel safe, just exploring, softening. Trusting whatever's moving, whether it's sadness, or joy or numbness or rage or love. And if you need it, if it's helpful to stabilize the practice at any interval that feels right, just repeat the phrase, something like, caring enough to be close now. I care enough to be close, to feel what I'm feeling. And I really think it's appropriate to sense this as an act of generosity for ourselves, for us all. See if you can sense how right it feels, this intention, this act of generosity to be close, to be a little bit more undefended or open, allowing the heart to be tenderized by whatever's moving, whatever's being felt. So in a way, we're manifesting this wise and compassionate desire to join the world, right? This willingness to feel what we're feeling means that we're leaving behind denial, leaving behind distraction and overwhelm and all the ways we shrink and collapse and hide. And instead, we're re-entering this wild world, this great swirl of feeling, feeling what we're feeling what's alive to feel. This is an act of beautiful courage to be willing to be right in the middle, feeling what we're feeling, undefended, not trying to get anywhere to some end point, but sensing the generosity. It's really a very earthy quality of love and compassion, this willingness to be in the middle. Feel the sense of the body, of embodiment right here. Our sensitive heart feels, right? It's sensitive. We want to honor, respect this sensitivity. We want to cultivate it. We don't want to believe any thought that this is too much. We want to stay open. Well, maybe there's a love, a wisdom that has the capacity to feel this, what's being felt now. And we're not focusing on specifically on what's difficult, we're taking in the totality of what's here, including how beautiful it is to be willing to feel, how ennobling it is. May this goodness continue. May it increase. May it never end. May this courageous goodness, this willingness to be right in the middle, feeling the totality of what's here, moving here. May this goodness continue. May it increase and never end. May the wisdom and love that's here now, may it continue and increase and never end. So you can use phrases like that to develop, to, in a sense, purify how we're showing up in this very real way. Care enough to be close. I care enough to be right here in this generous way, in this good way, loving way. May all this goodness here, this love and wisdom here, may continue, increase, and never end. So just continuing the practice on our own now. We'll continue in silence. Remembering this possibility, caring enough to be close, caring enough to feel this generosity of the heart, this beautiful courage and persistence, this not forgetting that it's like this right now. Sensing this as something truly good. May this goodness continue and increase and never end. Just in this very simple but still beautiful way of being close, right in the middle, feeling what we're feeling. And taking a little time, adjust the body as you might need to. And again, it's really nice to be together. Appreciate people showing up for our Tuesday group. And just a reminder that I do record Tuesday evenings, so I spotlight myself. Your video will never get picked up in the recording. But later in the evening, when we open it up for discussion time, the audio does get recorded. So just so you know that. And all of these programs that get recorded go right up immediately to Common Ground's YouTube channel. So you can always listen anytime or share it with other folks if you think they might be interested. And the audio gets put up on the dharmaseed.org website, which is a wonderful place to hear lots of different teachers, their Dharma talks. So, and all, not all, but most of Common Ground's talks get put up on Dharma Seed. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of the guided meditation, not just here in Minneapolis, but I'm sure everywhere in each of our lives in its own particular way, there is this movement between the joys and the very real, very impactful sorrows, things that are confusing, things that are painful, things that are disrupting in different ways, disorienting, and things that are very grounding and healing and beautiful. And this is just a way of summarizing what it is to be a human being. Sometimes in Buddhism, we talk about the 10,000 joys and sorrows, or the eight worldly winds, or the eight vicissitudes. Sometimes it's translated as gain, all the way that we get what we want, all the ways we don't get what we want, all the praise that we sometimes receive, all the judgment, blame that we receive, the status that we get at times, and then the opposite, being marginalized, being abused, being mistreated, right? That we're moving through these, yeah, these different conditioned realities, different circumstances. And so, what I love about the Buddhist teachings and practices is just how earthy, how grounded it is. Ajahn Sumedho referred to these practices as earthworm practices. And in that way, it's really trustworthy. How can I take care of my heart in the deepest ways when it's like this, when the world is like this, or my personal life is like this? And how can I take care of the world when I'm like this and the world is like this? And sometimes this, I'm trying to articulate what I think is a natural, organic given in our heart that we do care about taking care of ourselves. And it's when we're not overwhelmed, when we're not distracted, we realize in the same way I want to take care of myself, in the same way that I want to avoid harm, you also are a sensitive being. You also want to be safe and protected, right? So that kind of natural desire to want to take care of myself and to want to take care of everyone, it, it just comes with the territory of being a sensitive being. We can't help. I mean, we can do that, but we have to work really hard, actually, to keep somebody out of our heart, like to keep from remembering, to keep from sensing that they want to be happy just like I want to be happy. That person wants to avoid suffering in the same way I want to avoid suffering. That's the easy thing to have that sympathetic resonance, that empathy. That comes naturally. But we humans can avoid it, by concocting ideas that this person isn't worthy of my love or my concern, my care. And it's important that we keep an open mind that it isn't an either or, like either I'm caring for myself or I'm caring for the world. That might be a failure of imagination, a failure of understanding the depth of how it is. There may be a way to really, in the deepest way, care for myself, and also in the deepest way, care for all beings. And just in a pragmatic way, we can check that out, like to operate from that premise and see how that works for me. To be living for the benefit of all beings, including myself. Some of you know you've been coming on Tuesday nights or listening to the talks from Sunday morning. And I've been talking about this refuge of truth, this willingness to align with the truth of the way it is. And reminding myself, reminding us, the truth isn't something that somebody can own or grasp or tuck away somewhere safe. When like we do sometimes in the Buddhist tradition, we talk about the path of awakening or waking up to the truth of the way it is, but it isn't some secret teaching that is articulated to us. What we're waking up to is the process, the very nature of the process of being, the nature of the mind, the nature of experience. And and we never, it never, that awakening, that insight never depends on one's ability to articulate the insight, the truth, right? It's about aligning or harmonizing or being with the truth or the absence of being disconnected, or as we eventually discover, the absence of being caught up in my fixed views, my fixed ideas about things, which is a way, is the classic way of being disconnected. We think we know, in a conceptual way, the truth of the moment, the truth of my mind, the truth of the way it is. And that fixation, that fixed view, that fixed idea is what keeps the heart from aligning, from harmonizing, from being intimate, from resting in the natural process that's here and now, the way it is here and now. It's very sobering, our practice, being a human being. Some of you know Jack, the character, the person Jack Engler, who died not that long ago, but he was one of the early Westerners who went to Bodh Gaya, got to know Deepa Ma, this really wonderful teacher in our lineage, very inspiring person, Indian woman, and practiced with people like Sharon Salzberg and Joseph Goldstein and some of the early Westerners who went to India uh, to practice in the late 60s and early 70s. And he later came back and got his degree in psychology, his graduate degree in psychology at Harvard, I believe. And he wrote his dissertation on the teachings of the Buddha, on dharma practice, as essentially a practice of wise grieving, right? So we humans, we we've been infected in the ways, or we've been conditioned in the ways we've been conditioned to think things and get seduced, attached to our thoughts about things. And we have to let all that go. And there's a lot of grieving, letting go of what we think we know, letting go of what we think is true, so that we can actually open to the truth, align, harmonize with the truth of the present moment. And there's so much grieving involved because in that process, we realize, we refine what is truly a refuge. We realize that our even really wholesome relationships, as healing as they can be, as supportive as they can be, they can't be our refuge. Good friendships, good family connections, let alone our material resources, let alone the skills that I've developed in my life, any competence that I have, as good as that is to be competent and to have skills to help us navigate our lives, to do what needs to be done, they're not the ultimate refuge. A lot of us are discovering that, as technology, as artificial intelligence increases, a lot of our jobs might become obsolete. So whatever skills we have, well, The computer can do it so much faster and more cheaply. Even our bodies, even the way our mind is conditioned, these things may be a temporary refuge for us. They might be useful, functional in moments, helpful in moments, but they're not going to be our salvation. They're not going to be an ultimate refuge for us, make our heart feel safe. When I'm dependent on my friendships, it kind of ruins them. It's like, imagine if we were honest with the friend that we're dependent on. I really need this friendship. You can't leave me. And not only can't you leave me, you can't change because I'm dependent on the way it is, this friendship, the way it is now, because it's really working for me. So don't change, you know, that would ruin it. Same thing with, as nice as it is to have a comfortable and safe home to live in, we can ruin that too by needing it to be perfect, to be more safe. I need more security equipment. I need to move to a different place. So there's a real part of our practice that's learning how to abandon, how to recognize and abandon things that we're clinging to that aren't worth clinging. Doesn't mean we have to get rid of our friends and family or get rid of our comfortable homes or material resources or our competencies or anything that we might in the past have felt dependent on. We just need to see things as they are. This is nice. This is helpful. I really appreciate this. And if and when this is gone, circumstances changes and this goes away, I want to be okay. I want to be able to navigate that without being crushed, without being condemned to sorrow, right? Isn't that true? If cancer comes our way, or if loss comes our way, or any of the 10,000 joys or sorrows come our way, I aspire, right, to be able to be intimate with whatever comes my way, unafraid, balanced, responsive, happy, loving, right? So in Buddhism, this is what we mean when we talk about the, what the Buddha points to as our aspiration for our practice. We often use the term the unconditioned. So realizing something that's not dependent on circumstances or conditions. So instead of happiness that is worldly, dependent on worldly circumstances or conditions, we're interested in a happiness that's unconditioned, not worldly. So the world can do whatever it's going to do. The 10,000 joys and sorrows, the innumerable causes and conditions that are swirling and making, you know, Minneapolis the way that it is right now, and senseless killings and these terrible separations and disruptions in families that are happening. Oh yeah, it's like this now. And I can still show up without being crushed or collapsed. I can still respond in ways that takes care of others and takes care of myself. I can still set good in motion because I'm not dependent on the world being a different kind of way. So similar to what Jack Engler wrote, evidently in his dissertation, that how the spiritual path, the Buddhist spiritual path at least, is this path of grieving. Another way I still think about it is, in terms of my own personal practice, is just learning how to tease out any idealism. I've developed over the many years of, being interested in spiritual life, I've developed a real radar, real sensitivity for ways my mind might be clinging to positive ideas. There's nothing wrong with positive ideas, but but the heart getting dependent Because whenever we pluck something positive, we always get the opposite comes with it. We don't get, if I aspire to summer, warmth, then all of a sudden winter becomes a personal problem because summer's my salvation, winter is my hell. You all liking me, you all thinking this is a great talk, all of a sudden I also pluck out, I hope they don't hate it. I hope they don't think I'm a fool, right? I don't get the wanting people to like the talk without, excuse me, without the fear that you're not going to like the talk. This is that dualistic world that we mostly exist in, right? So we're always being charmed by what we like and want, and we're always being haunted by what we don't like and don't want. And that's what we take for an ordinary worldly life, a mind that is attached, identified with the conditions of one's body and mind in the world around them. But this is often wrongly understood, this understanding about positive and negative, and not getting confused by positive and negative, by happiness or unhappiness, by getting what I want or not getting what I don't want. People often misunderstand that as leading to an indifference. Okay, screw the world. I'm not for it or against it. And then all that we can imagine is sort of someone flatlining, I just don't care about anything. But that's also a worldly, that's sort of the natural result of being worldly is this kind of indifference, this different ways that we give up on life and collapse with overwhelm, right? We tend to swing from engagement. Okay, I'm really gonna develop the competence to get what I want and to avoid getting what I don't want. And we go for it and we really put our whole heart into getting what we want and avoiding what we don't want. And then we bump up against the great movement of causes and conditions, and we feel betrayed because we do get what we don't want, and we don't always get what we do want. And then we slide into those other habits of giving up, indifference, cynicism, nihilism, thinking God's out to get us, or somebody is. But I think the real opposite of this dance between uh, let's say idealism and then being burnt by idealism and wanting to give up, the real way out is this great tenderness. It's like we realize that running from the insecurity and uncertainty in life doesn't go anywhere. It just leads to frustration and stress. So being right in the middle turns out to be, in a strange way, paradoxical way, being right in the middle, open, exposed, seeing, feeling everything, sensing everything, letting it all move through, letting it all be like the whole point of the sensitive heart is for it to be touched over and over again. Endless sense experiences arising, pleasant and unpleasant, and we let them touch. Okay. Now it's like this. Now this is what's being felt. This is what's being sensed, right? Like being right in the middle in a way, uh, in that way that has both that great breadth and that great subtlety or depth, right? So like total exposure, total presence, openness, right? That's the place where we begin to feel the confidence, like that recognition that what the heart is capable of doing, like being open, feeling what we're feeling, the joys and the sorrows, the confusion, clarity, the whole range of our human experience. And we start to feel more and more tender. That's a sign, that's a relatively trustworthy sign, not overwhelmed, but a tenderness that's trusted, that 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 confidence that, oh yeah, this is the way, tenderness is the way. And tenderness, because it comes with that wisdom, that sober wisdom. Some of you might remember this famous line from Martin Luther King: the arc of the moral world bends towards justice. And it's really, I think, an interesting little teaching. And I would like that to be true, that the arc of the world, the arc of the moral world bends towards justice. But the truth is for me, let's see if this is true for you. The truth is for me, I don't know whether that's true. And now I know that I don't know. And that feels really wise to me. That feels really grounding for me. Like my relationship to the idea of progress, I have an open mind about it. I don't know. And I know that I don't know. So I'm not going to cling to the idea of progress. I'm not going to I'm not going to do something that causes my heart to get dependent on this idea. Nor am I going to cling to any idea that we're going to hell. The world is falling apart and we're all going to hell and it's just going to get worse. I'm not going to cling to that either because I've developed quite a bit of confidence that I know that I don't know. And weirdly, that's really enlivening, to know that I don't know how things are going to unfold. And if you check, you might realize you also know that you don't know. And you might, if you hang out in that space of knowing that you don't know, you might discover there's a lot of uplift, a lot of confidence, and a lot of generosity, like that generosity of being willing to show up. Well, this will be interesting. I know that I don't know. So that you see how it doesn't allow us to give up because what we think, what we say, what we do, it might really matter in terms of setting good in motion in ways that are really meaningful in terms of minimizing suffering, not only for ourselves, but for many folks. Who knows the reverberations of our lives? What we say, what we think, what we do. Who knows the reverberations? We don't know, do we? And it also, what I'm talking about, it frees us up from, like in Buddhism, I think one of my early Buddhist teachers used to say a lot, subtle is significant. And in the West, we tend to have a pretty arrogant or fundamentalist view that could be described as a materialistic view, that whatever is subtle is a manifestation of the gross. So, we have a material body, for example, and because of this biology of my body, made up of these different, building blocks, whether you go down to the subatomic level or you're just talking about different minerals and so on and so on. Um, but because of this dense stuff we call material stuff, we get something subtle, the mind. The mind comes out of the gross, right? And then we have things, really sublime things like love, for example, or um, other wholesome and unwholesome emotions and wholesome and unwholesome ways of relating. But it comes out of this kind of grosser material world. And that's sort of more of the Western it doesn't include everyone, but that's sort of the general Western philosophical ground, and all of us in varying degrees have been infected by this fundamentalist belief in materialism. And we don't want we don't know whether that's true. That's really the approach is to remove the fundamentalist uh, dependence on all the ways that materialist view is sort of established in our mind and move in the direction of being open and knowing that we don't know. And the Eastern philosophical foundation is much more that subtle is the ground that manifests the gross. So this world, and the computer in front of me and my desk and my body and all that feels sort of obvious and gross and solid, right? From an Eastern point of view, generally speaking, I'm really summarizing in kind of a gross way. But, you know, all of this is a manifestation of something that's very subtle, the mind. So the world, the material world, the physical world, the ordinary world that we normally refer to as the world is just a product of the mind. Like a dream, tonight, a little bit later, we'll have dreams, most of us. And those dreams are going to seem in the dream to be a material world. Maybe, perhaps, just like this moment seems very real, but it's really just a dream of some kind, right? Now, again, it's not about getting dependent on either of those two views, but really understanding we know that we don't know, and we can just start exploring. Like one of the things I've explored, and I think we just generally explore in spiritual life, is how impactful subtle things are. Like, some of the insights I've had along the way in my practice, where I've seen, I often, when I'm teaching about meditation practice, I'll say endlessly, I probably said it, 10, 20, 30,000 times. I don't know, I haven't counted. But over the many years I've been teaching and talking about Dharma practice, that any moment of experience is an experience, a something, an object of experience, and it's being known. And that's all there ever is. All of what we call Mark's life or your life has been these successive moments of something being known. And we can't separate the knowing. We can't like find the knower that's doing the knowing. And we can't find the object. We only know there's an experience. Like I'm seeing my screen right now, my computer screen, and I can sense in the seeing of the screen that it's being known, right? And the knowing is dependent on seeing the screen, and the seeing the screen is dependent on the knowing. Hope this isn't too weird, but there's a real insight, right? That's really subtle. When the mind sees that is true in one's own experience, the gross reality of my life has radically shifted. So how I now move through this life in very ordinary ways, how I is affected by that insight, that understanding, that very subtle experience. Seeing things in that more subtle way has all kinds of effects. Like, for example, that common ground exists, right? And all the ways that common ground have affected people, you know. So, so all of that, in a sense, arises from these very subtle insights. Another way you can think about this is the Buddha way back 2,500 years ago, getting to know his own mind. Just think about how many reverberations, how many lives have been affected in very ordinary, earthy ways. How we treat each other, what we've refrained from doing that had we done would have had all kinds of implications. It's not just the Buddha depth of understanding that has have had impact, but many people's um, deep, subtle spiritual insights have had all kinds of very gross, meaningful reverberations. So I'm just bringing that up to maybe inspire some open-mindedness that investing, caring about what is subtle might be a way to really take care of the world and to take care of our life. It doesn't mean that we neglect feeding people who are hungry, protecting people who are being harmed. Doesn't mean that at all. It just means that the capacity to do that might be really dependent on also being interested in what's subtle. And generally, the arena of what's subtle is how the mind is relating. You could think of any moment as there's something happening, meaning I'm seeing something, I'm hearing something, I'm feeling something in my body, I'm smelling and tasting something, and I'm thinking something. So that's sort of the elements of worldly experience. And there's something more subtle, which is when I'm seeing, how I'm relating, how I'm understanding that experience of seeing, when I'm hearing, when I'm feeling something in my body, when I'm thinking a thought, how is the mind understanding that experience of thinking? How is it relating? How's the mind relating to that ordinary experience of thinking, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, seeing? That's important. So in Buddhism, we often refer to that as one's view, one's understanding, how much wisdom is present. And it's really relevant. It can feel dangerous for us in a sense, like when the world is the way it is, and for a lot of us, it's what's up front for us here in the Twin Cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis is just the presence of ICE in our city and what's happening to so many of our immigrant neighbors and to many of the people who are trying to be witnesses to what's going on are also in harm's way, as Renee Good and Alex Pretty were. And so that's front and center. And it can feel dangerous to take our eyes off of something that feels really big. And for others, it might be financial insecurity, or maybe somebody in the family's really sick, or there's a painful loss going on in your life, or any number of things that come our way as human beings. And it can feel like either I'm not doing justice, I'm not really caring if I get interested in what's subtle. That, so part of what we want to do is when things are relatively balanced or settled for us, is to build this respect for what's subtle and to begin to see in very simple, earthy ways how practical, how functional this depth, this subtle understanding is in terms of just navigating ordinary things in life. We see people, in the news, and maybe some of you have been involved in some of the actions, not just the current actions with ICE, but just other really provocative, intense situations. And it's so powerful to see um, our practice manifesting like that capacity to remain clear and kind and fearless and balanced in the midst where so much big energy is moving. And maybe people, when we have discussion time coming up in a few minutes, it might be nice for people to uh, give some of those examples where the peace, the stillness, the emptiness, in the sense of seeing big movements, but seeing that they're empty so that we can actually be close to them and actually understand the nature of what's in motion, the different forces around us, like not personalize it. Oh yeah, it's like this. So someone meets us with a lot of fear, or somebody meets us with a lot of anger, or somebody meets us with a lot of neediness. Or we see one of those three things in ourselves, that we're the one who's really needy. We're the one who's really angry. We're the one who's really closed down, right? It's like we don't have to be confused. Oh yeah, sometimes it's like this. And have that confidence. My heart knows how to be close to that. Knows how not to be confused by that. Can I be with this? Like there's almost over time this presumption, yeah, I bet I can be with this. I don't know yet how to be with it, but I'm pretty sure I can learn to be with this too. Just like this heart, this wisdom has learned to be with so many other things. And the way the Buddha describes this, and I'll end here tonight, I'll just add this one more teaching before I open it up for discussion. Like, what does the heart actually distill from the subtle work of, like we did during the guided sit, where we practice being right in the middle, feeling, not clinging to anything worldly, like some idea, trying to make something happen, but just sort of settling more and more. It's almost like peeling back the layers. So now it's like this. Now this is being felt. What else is here being felt? Oh, now this, right? It's like going from gross to subtle, letting everything move, giving permission for everything to express itself, to be revealed in the space of this wise, fearless, kind presence, right? And what gets revealed in that space is, stinginess is not the way. Because every way we see that intention of greed, of holding on, right? We see, right, wisdom, that wise, balanced presence sees, oh yeah, that's what sets in motion suffering for me and for others. Not release, not freedom, not love. Stinginess is not the way. Right? It just emerges and with it a lot of confidence. Now, I get swept away by stinginess, right? But almost always when I'm getting swept away by stinginess, on some level, not perfect clarity, but the heart understands, honey, this is not the way. Yeah, perfect storm, stinginess, greediness has gotten triggered. It has some momentum. To some degree, it's expressing itself in this outer way by my thoughts, my words, and my actions. But I'm pretty sure this is not in the direction of happiness for myself or anyone. And that interest will help me confirm, right? Because I'll continue to be aware. Oh, yeah, just as I thought, this is a cause for stress. Okay, good to see this. And that I'm not saying that sarcastically. It really is good. It's enlivening, it's liberating to see that stinginess and greediness is not the way for me or for anybody's happiness. What else does this work teach us? Hate, ill will is not the way. Kindness is the way. Tenderness is the way. How many little and bigger ways have we realized this truth? That we still have, obviously, right, momentum. We can still be triggered in ways that bring the ill will up, the fear up, throwing people out of our heart. But with that reflective awareness that we call, mindful awareness, wisdom awareness, we see, oh yeah, ill will is not the way. Imagine if we had an incredibly skilled uh, videographer and a great editor, and they were just filming every emotion that we ever manifested in our heart and how it gets acted out in the world. We would learn this so quickly that kindness is the way, ill will is not the way. Stinginess is not the way, generosity is the way. This capacity to let go when that's the appropriate thing, like to not hold. Because, life just rips it out anyway. We can't hold on to anything. And then the last quality, when this is the Buddhist teachings on the three wise intentions, the three wise resolves. It's one of the 8 limbs of the Eightfold Path that the Buddha taught. Non-harming is the way. Really valuing not adding more harm. Justifying causing harm is not the way. Wanting revenge, wanting to cause harm, thinking that the harm I'm causing is justified or the harm other people are causing is justified. It's not the way. It's like this deep, resonant understanding. There's already too much suffering. There's got to be a way for all of us to move forward without adding more. Now, will we be able to avoid causing harm? Probably not. We're on a planet where life eats life, but we can aspire to not harm. We can aspire to cultivate a sensitivity. So whenever we're in the vicinity of causing ourselves or anybody harm, this great tenderness, this great sensitivity, like, oh yeah, I don't want to cause harm. That's what's beautiful, is this aspiration, this resonant aspiration of non-harming, not causing harm. The way this shift arises, I think, is described nicely by the simile from Robert Thurman. He was one of the first Westerners to ordain as a Buddhist monk under the Dalai Lama back in the early 60s, I think it was. And then he since became a Buddhist scholar after he took his monastic robes off and became a layperson, and eventually was a professor at Columbia University in New York City. And he gives this beautiful simile. Some of you have heard me mention it because I like it so much. He said, if you live just a few stops from where you work in New York City and you get on the subway and it's packed to the gills with every expression of humanity, people you don't want to be standing next to and people maybe you do want to be standing next to, but it's all there, the whole mess of humanity. And we kind of would create that sort of wall of callousness, like, don't F with me, I'm just here to survive my two stops until I get out. And then he says, now imagine you're going to be on that subway packed in with all those people forever, for eternity. We wouldn't use that strategy of closing ourselves off and just get me through. Don't look at anybody in the eye. They're just going to take advantage of me, ask for money, or whatever we might think we're afraid of. Be sexually assaulted or um, get involved in a conversation we don't want to be involved with, or whatever it might be. So I'm just going to go inside, and remove myself. But if we were on that subway forever, that would be just a real hell realm to be disconnected. So, this way to practice in these times and this way of aligning with the truth of the present moment, it really has to have this flavor of tenderness. And some of you know that in the later Buddhist traditions, this really gets highlighted, this bodhisattva vow to live and practice for the benefit of all beings, this emphasis on compassion. I mean, it's always there in the Buddhist teachings, but it becomes highlighted in a more powerful way as the centuries after the time of the Buddha unfolded. And just this sense that any location, like when we think about any person, like an immigrant family in Minnesota now that doesn't have legal status, for example, if we just had that sense that we could inhabit any location, we could be one of the marginalized groups, or we could be the most privileged person in the society. This was sort of developed as thought experiments. Like, if we didn't know where we were going to land in a society, what kind of society would we construct? Well, we'd construct a society where everybody took care of everybody, right? Because if we know that we don't know where we're going to end up, we'd want each place where someone could end up to be a place that's as safe as it can be, as cared for as one could be, right? So that tenderness is really unnatural. It arises naturally when we connect, when we let the truth of the present moment have its effect. It doesn't mean that, all we should do is a Buddhist retreat until our heart is perfect or something like that. It's like this engagement is where we discover this truth, whether you're raising kids or going to work or a real activist trying to change the ways that harm is being committed. This is exactly the place to see what is the way and what's not the way. To see the subtle truth. Oh, yeah, when the mind is relating in this way, this is what gets set in motion. We see it in ourselves, we see it in others, and we're seeing it in a way that doesn't lead to judgment or blame. It's just seeing the truth. It's not personal, it's the truth, you know, it's the underlying truth, and it's not personal. If we think it's personal, we're not really seeing the underlying truth. We're not seeing the actual nature of the mind, the nature of experience, because that underlying nature is nature in this impersonal sense. I'd love to hear from people. We have about 10 minutes or so. Your own experiences, your own deepening, anything that relates to the talk tonight or not, questions that might be emerging. Just feel free to unmute yourself, share your name. Feel free also, if you want, to share your pronouns if that's helpful, maybe where you're from. Anybody feel like getting the conversation started?
Yeah, I can share. My name's Jamie. I'm in Seattle. I use they them pronouns. And Mark, I really enjoyed you saying like I don't know and I know that I don't know. And I've noticed I lots of thoughts coming up um pretty frequently. I guess just like a lot of selfing of like thoughts of like what other people think of me. And there's like a lot of certainty. And I've kind of gotten into the habit of being like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, um,
And is that
and
liberating? I mean,
yeah,
in an
yeah,
ordinary sense?
yeah, totally. And then I've been trying to get used to, I feel like I've been like understanding like selfing and sort of like emptiness and anatta a little bit more. So I've been trying to disengage with the like I, me, mine. And I like recently Shelley said like who knows, and so I've actually kind of changed to that. I'm because I feel it felt like when I was going like I don't know, it almost kind of felt like the like you were talking about like how the mind's relating. It was a little bit pushy, kind of a little bit like I don't know, like let's not do that. But who knows is it feels like a little bit more open. But yeah, that's what when you were talking about that, it made me think about that.
And one more version of that because like Jamie's suggesting, we just have to find our own language and we have to let it evolve too over time. But another version of it is that another teacher has suggested is maybe not so. So we're thinking something like that person really hates me. And then we just let it drop in. Oh, who knows? Or maybe not so. Yeah. Thanks, Jamie. Who'd like to go next?
I'm Richard of Minneapolis. Today, I found myself either swinging to extreme love to try to explain a situation or extreme fear, and neither really held the space very well because they were extremes. And when I got to a point where I was aware of what I was doing, I came to the middle and I found uh, a better space. And I was able to kind of incorporate both sides and blend it and reason through it a bit. So that was kind of my experience today.
Yeah. That sounds beautiful, Richard. And I sometimes our idea of love is it has something extra. One of the things I really appreciate about how the Buddha talks about metta or love is that it's really characterized by the absence of ill will. So instead of love being something, it's really more about what's not there. Like this heart at this time is empty of ill will, it doesn't have ill will. Oh, well, maybe this is love. So it has kind of a quieter uh, felt sense to it. Anyway, I don't know if that's useful, but you might just check in your experience.
It is, yeah, because I'm identifying the love with a person, and so to I don't know reframe that love into a sort of an emptiness has has some merit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard. Still have time for a couple more folks to share with the group.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I'm in Minneapolis and she or they pronouns. And I was just, I was thinking, this Robert Thurman thing about like, imagining things like just like this forever. Like what if this just wasn't gonna stop? And like um how really sort of frightening that can be in terms of like elucidating the view and like how like they're really wanting it to be different, how like and how tight I can get around that idea. And like, even just to like sometimes imagine pulling that apart a little bit. It's tough, but I mean, I do think it's a great example for really seeing some of the ways the knots are tied in there. Yeah.
Yeah, and some of us have had that, when we have a really monotonous task that seems endless and and it can be so torturous. But then something will switch, our attitude, the way we're relating to the task will switch, and all of a sudden we'll experience so much joy in what 10 minutes ago felt like a hell realm. Oh, I got so many more to do. I'm never going to be done. It's just interesting. It's just a little example of how attitude is such an important thing. Yeah. Thanks, Jessica. Anybody feel like having the last reflection for the group for the night? Still time? Always like to remind people it's an act of generosity to share, just we learn from each other.
Hi, my name is Adam. I'm in St. Paul. Um, I think sometimes as a way to sort of uh, not get stuck in taking things personally, I've been reminding myself that a lot of what's moving it's just causes and conditions. But I've noticed lately that I can use that almost defensively as like an excuse to just like close off from it or see things as preordained, be very fatalist. And so the reminder that we don't know was helpful, and stinginess is not the way. It's just a reminder that um, knowing things are a result of causes and conditions, but there's still all that space for curiosity and hope in just like doing what seems to be the wise thing in the moment.
Yeah. And our own experience tells us this, that engagement is energizing. And it's a balm for anxiety. Doing something is a balm for anxiety. I was one of those, I don't know, there's some people say 50,000 people outside for 2 hours on Friday in, I don't know what it was at the time, but about 10 degrees below zero. Um, but, and part of with my mind, God, who is this helping? Being outside, walking through the streets of downtown Minneapolis. Um, but it felt really good to be doing something in a situation where I don't always feel like there's something I can do that has much value. And so we have to just ask ourselves, like instead of figuring it out rationally, should I do this? Will it? It's like just try and see the effect, feel the effect of showing up, of stepping in, speaking up, whatever it might be. We could ask Adam right now. You spoke up. How's it feel? You stuck your neck out, What's the reverberation?
Good.
Thanks, Adam. And thanks for coming, everyone. Just a couple of announcements. There is a day-long retreat this Saturday. Feel free to join in. I'll be leading this Saturday, both on Zoom and in person at the center. And then a half-day retreat on February 7th, Saturday. Shelley Graff will be leading that. Shelley's also starting an intro class if you or you know someone who might be interested. 6 Tuesday evenings, both on Zoom and in person at the center, beginning on February 10th. I wanted to pass on, I got an email from James Perez, some of you know, one of the founding teachers of Spirit Rock, just wishing all of us in Minneapolis a lot of healing love. And Kamala Masters also called me today, just wanting to send love to all the folks in Minneapolis. Kamala is one of our longtime elders who has come to teach in Minnesota since the early 1990s. So it's just really great to hear from them. Wanted to pass that along. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks for showing up, and feel free to unmute yourself and say good night if you want.